So today I'm going to try to implement the Threepp renderer. I'm just going to try to compile the code that I have there so far. And then if I manage to do that, then I didn't put the renderer yet because the renderer is the main thing that I want to change. And I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do it, but I didn't like the way that they did it very much. So I'm going to try to implement my own thing. Hopefully try to simplify the way that they did things because I want to make something just for the stuff that I'm trying to do, which is just to render the graph. So I already know what kind of, but this is the thing that I'm not 100% sure because I might want to add different things later on that I want to render. But for now, it's going to be just the sphere, the tube geometry, and the cylinder geometry, I think, which are the ones that I was using to create the graph network. So I just want to create some, I was thinking about removing the scene as well, the scene object, and making everything part of the render. But now I think just to make things easier, I'm going to keep the way that it was as much as possible and then just change the render. So the way that I'm thinking about it is just creating a function that's going to receive the scene in the camera and just maintain the same stuff that they did, but then try to remove as many things as possible on the parts to create the shaders and manage the programs. That's what I'm trying to do. But for now, I just didn't, the only thing that I did was to get all the files that I think I'm going to need. And then I'll put some music. And I had to solve a bunch of problems and warnings that I was getting. So I just put all the stuff to see if it compiles, and I had to create another. Initially, I wasn't gonna do it like that, but I had to create another folder here. And the reason why is because of the source files. So initially, I was thinking about doing everything on the header files, but then I asked ChatGPT what's the downside of doing that, and then ChatGPT said that the problem is if you do everything on the header, then every time that you're gonna use a file, you're gonna have to copy or to put all the source code or the definitions, all the definitions of the functions as well. So it just increases the size of the stuff that you need to run the thing. So if you put everything on like the declarations on the header and the definition separately, then you just need to import the headers, and I think it makes more sense. But then the annoying part is that you have to create another, like I had to create another folder, the source folder, and then put everything on the include folder here. And then because of that, I didn't want to put a bunch of extra things on the main CMake file. So I decided to create another CMake file. And I'm gonna show the CMake that I did. And the thing that is the most confusing is the paths. So I want to explain that. So on this one, the way that I'm doing is just to put add subdirectory, and then I decided to create, and I think this is the kind of the standard that I think I'm going to follow, but I'm not really sure if it's confusing or not. So like I might change this in the future, but for now it seems that is the best way. So I have an external folder, which is the one that I'm putting the libraries that come externally, and the libs folder is the libraries that I'm going to create for the project that I'm going to maintain. So this is going to be probably the graphics library and another library to handle the physics. So I think I'm going to call it network. And probably I'm just going to try to copy from the other project and just make a class or something like that that creates the graph and creates the physics simulation or does the calculations and things like that and put it on a library. And then I'm going to leave the main stuff to put on the actual source code for the project, which is going to be the functions that create the GUI. This is another thing that I understand now, is that IMGUI is supposed to be they just manage the GUI elements, and then you're responsible for creating the logic that is going to synchronize the GUI elements with whatever visualization you want to create. So you're responsible for creating the pipeline for rendering 3D stuff with OpenGL, and then you have to create different classes that puts them together and create the style of the application. And then I saw some journal videos where he talks about this stuff, and I got these examples here. So I'm probably going to try to start with the stuff that he has here and then develop from that. But pretty much the way that I did is just create a folder called include, where I put all the header files, and then a folder called source, and they mimic each other. So like it's the same structure for the paths. And then obviously I'm putting the declarations on the headers and the definitions here. And then I had to create another CMake file. And then I'm just including as add subdirectory on this one. And what this is going to do is just going to run the CMake that I put on this project here. So I think I'm going to follow this pattern as well. So create the other library, create another CMake list file. The way that I'm doing this one is to just put all the source here. I asked ChatGPT as well, like if there's a way to include all the sources without having to manually explicitly put one by one. And then it gave me a code that I think it uses glob or something like that. It's like file and then glob. And then it's pretty much doing a loop, or not doing a loop, it's using the wild characters to find all the CPP files inside of the directory and put inside of a variable here. So like all files, and then you use, it's something like that. I don't remember really well. But then it said that the downside of this is that it might be missing, like if you do some changes or something like that, you might miss some source files. Like I didn't understand very well, but it seems that it's not the best. So it's better according to ChatGPT, and I think I'm just gonna trust because it's not that big of a deal, I think, to explicitly declare all the CPP files here, which is kind of annoying because then every time you want to change something, you need to remember this. And then I tried to compile it, and then I got a bunch of errors. So the way that I'm doing is just creating, putting this all in a variable, and then I'm using this add library command. Then here's the first thing is the name of the library that you want to create, which you decide which it's going to be. Then you have to put all the CPP files, and then you use target include directory to include all the header files as well. And the thing that is confusing to understand, so according to ChatGPT again, it seems like you have to, I haven't tested, but I think like it doesn't matter that much, but this is, I don't like this pattern to be honest from, maybe it is not even correct because of this thing here. But yeah, there is some stuff on CMake that on the documentation that they tell you to use this. It's like it allows you to have different specifications for different types of builds, as far as I understand. So you can have one for build and one for install or something like that. It's very confusing. I don't like that much, but it seems to work. So you put this, and then you put whatever path you want. The header should be included. And then I just put it another one here just to make sure. So it doesn't matter that much it's working. So I'm not going to bother with that too much. But the confusing part is that once you put here, it's going to consider that this is the top, the parent or the root folder that the header files are at. So the way you have to include the headers on the other files is based on that root folder. So whatever you have on the include is going to consider as the root, and then you have to put the relative path from the root to include the files on the other header files and on the CPP files. And the reason why that's kind of confusing is because then, like, if I create a library, then how I'm supposed to put the paths on the actual main project? And if there is paths from other libraries that are the same, because the name that I chose here is kind of generic, graphics. So if I install another library that also has a graphics path, then what's going to happen? Like if there is the same path, same relative path from two different libraries, how is going to resolve the conflict? And I'm not really sure about that, but I think I'm just going to do it like this for now. And so far, then like which they have as well on Threepp, I created this library here that I created this file that includes all the other files on the project, and then I'm using this as kind of the interface for the other one, so I can import all of them. Then obviously you have the option, I think. So if you don't want to import all the files, you just put one. But I think I'm gonna use all of them, so it's better to just put everything on one file and then just include this one. But then that's the confusing part because I have to put the path here from the include of the other project because of the way that I'm including everything. And then I thought about it. Maybe it's better to, because yeah, maybe it's better to put the include from here, and then like I can include lib here, for example. And then I think if I did that, I would be able to specify as graphics here, graphics, and then this. And then that might be better because there's less chances of having a conflict. But I think for now, I'm gonna leave it like this. And then I had a bunch of problems and warnings and errors because of some stuff that was missing. So I commented this out here and I compiled one by one and tried to solve all the errors. And it seems that it is working now. So the last thing that the stuff that I stopped at is this part here. I'm just copying the example that they have on the GitHub repo for Threepp. And now I'm trying to compile. I think I haven't tried because the thing is this. I didn't like the way that they did this function here. So they did it differently than Three.js does. The way that they did it was by creating a bunch of inheritance, which I don't understand very well why they did that. They did it like that. So now I have to think about this, how I'm gonna do it. So the way that Three.js is, the mesh basic material, they specify all these variables here, and then they have this function on the base class, which is the material class. It's gonna be the class that all the other classes inherit from. And then this class allows you to change the default values of the material based on the parameters you pass, which is an object, which is this function here. So the way that they did this on the other one is kind of weird because they created this other file called interfaces, and then they have a bunch of inheritance that I don't understand very well why they did it like this. So I'm not really sure how I'm going to do this. Let's see if I can find the header. So that's pretty much how they are doing. They're inheriting a bunch of things. And the way that I think that they made it is that each one of this is a struct, and then each one of them contains a variable. So it's like they took each one of these variables here and separated into their own struct. And I don't understand why. It doesn't make sense to me. And the other thing that's I didn't add, but they add, is this texture class here. And the reason why is because I'm not sure if I'm gonna, probably later on I'm gonna use pictures, but for now I think I'm not gonna do it. And I think I'm not really sure if I need to put texture if I'm not gonna use pictures. So I'm trying to avoid. The goal obviously is to try to simplify everything as much as possible, because complexity is always gonna be like a natural thing, a natural progression of the thing. Hey, what's up? So the main thing that I think I want to allow is for the color. The color seems to be like the main stuff. But I have to think about what do I have to change here. So this I got from ChatGPT as well. If you want to pass, so the way that they are doing is with an std on order map, which is just is the same as an object in Python. So it's key value pairs. The key is a string and the value is this material value, which is a standard variant. And as far as I understand, this stuff is just used to have it's kind of like a better version of enum. So it just gives you a bunch of options, and then it allows you to select what kind of type the thing is based on these options here. So whatever you pass there, whatever this type is gonna assume is the second value, the value of the key is gonna be of that type based on some logic that they create to get the value. So I think the thing that I'm gonna do is just change the values of the. So I asked ChatGPT as well to convert the Three.js code into C++, but it didn't convert very well because C++ is different because it depends on the types. So I don't remember really well. Yeah, I put here. So the main one that is different is that on here they have map, and on C++ that doesn't work because you have to specify the type. So I can't use this. So the way that they are doing, as far as I understand on the other classes, is using this standard shared pointer based on a texture. So I think I'm going to avoid doing that in the beginning. And then I have to understand this comes from the constants. Just using, So I think the main thing is probably color in the beginning. So I'm doing the color here. I have to see how they do it on the other one. I think it's this structure. They don't assign with a default value. Let me see this. Oh, maybe they do here. So this is initializing the color with this, whatever we pass here. Which probably comes from the other class. Maybe I should. I'm hesitant to close all these files because I'm probably gonna need them, but I think it's better to just close everything now. And then if I need, I just find them again. Because now I'm much more familiar with how everything works. I'm probably gonna need the thing that I haven't spent too much time yet is the render and the GL. Also thinking about different names to put here. Because I don't like GL, maybe something, trying to think about something more descriptive that's gonna make it easier to understand what it is. But basically, as far as I understand, the way that it works is that the GL render is gonna communicate with a bunch of functions. So the main entry point is the programs, and the programs contain a list of program. So there's a programs class and the program class, and then the programs contains a list. I think it's a vector on C++ of shared pointers to program. Shared pointers of the type program, and then the program is a class that is gonna have all the logic to create the shader and to create a program from the shaders. So the programs is gonna select which shader you're gonna use, and the program is gonna, from the fragment and the vertex shader, is gonna create a program from that, and then it's gonna have a bunch of functions that manage the structure of the buffers. So from the higher level class, this is the point that is not very clear to me. Is like, what is exactly the pathway from the classes of the geometry classes and the material classes, and the way that they manipulate the data, and the class that manipulates, that has a control of how the buffers work and how they create the whole pipeline. That's the part that I'm trying to understand. I try to make product don't go same path from other. Have a good day. Free. Yo, thank you, man. I don't understand what you mean by that, but I think I'm gonna close all these files. It's kind of hard because I'm probably gonna need to look into them, but can just figure out where they are. And this part here of the render list is really, and the thing is, like, they probably did it like this because it's more complex the way that it works, because obviously you have to make it generic enough so that a bunch of use cases are good. So the way that they render everything probably makes sense. I don't understand it very well, but they create a stack and a list. And then based on the cycle, they put stuff on the stack and put the stuff on the render items thing, which is an object. And then based on that, they render everything. But I think for my use case, I probably can make a lot simpler. So just do a simple loop and then just render whatever the scene has. I think that's what I'm gonna do. And the scene is just gonna have objects as children, which are gonna be the meshes that I create based on the geometries that I want. That's probably the best path. But I have to clarify what exactly is the path from the higher level classes, the material classes and the geometry classes, to think about exactly how should I structure. I think I have to clarify the OpenGL functions to manage the buffers and stuff like that because it's kind of confusing. I'm probably gonna need the interface. So let me, oh, they initialize here. So they initialize with this default color, but it's based on the other thing. So as far as I understand, the problem is I have to put them side by side, so it's less confusing. So as far as, and but here is just the definition. So, yeah, this is the thing that I say. As far as I understand, when you do this two dots here and then you put this thing here, this is just initializing whatever attribute you have on the class with this value here. So this is saying that when you initialize, you have to pass a color, and then whatever color you pass is going to become this variable here. But where did I saw? I think it's on the implementation. This is the thing that is confusing, is that they created this interface and then they put these structs here. So I don't understand why. It would make a lot more sense, I think, to me if you put directly on the class. So, but maybe I have to put this stuff like as an argument, like do the same thing, but directly on the mesh material class. I'm not really sure how to do that. Can you make a game with only code without using any game engine? I'm not really sure, man. Thank you. Thank you, man. So this is the question. The way that you do this, I don't think I explained. So you just create add library, then you create this name, then you put the headers here. And this is gonna create it's gonna link everything to this name. And then on the main CMake file, you have to put the name here. So it's gonna get this name from this command here in the beginning. And then you just link the library to using this command here. And it seems like it works. So now I have to see. I think it's on the constructor. Yeah, so it's probably here. So the way that I would do it is just copying and the same thing that they did here. I put here. And then I don't know very well, but maybe I can put this. Maybe I can do two different ones as well. So let me think. It's confusing as well because I think that this class has multiple different implementations. And they have multiple different constructors. Not sure if I can do it like this. Yeah, but I think that if I do it like this, then like it's the definition already. So maybe I should do it the other way, and then I just on the CPP file I put this. So I think that's probably the way to do it. So But then, so maybe I have to put the thing there. Hmm. See if I like this. I think it's probably this works. So initialize with the fonts. As far as I remember, this is gonna be the white color. Initialize the font with white. And then they create this other function here. I'm not really sure why though. Because this one is supposed to. I guess the reason why they do like this is so they're giving two different options to create the class, but I don't understand why. Because the other alternative would be to have another constructor. So I have two different constructors, and then depending on which way the person initializes, uses either one. Maybe it doesn't matter that much because I can use this one to initialize it with a bunch of different values. So maybe if I do it like this, alright, I just put this thing here. This is the geometry. Not sure if how to initialize. I think these things are gonna be annoying at the beginning. To get used to how to do everything. Maybe it's with the curly braces. This doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT. I think it should be. The way that makes sense is like this. Hmm. Not sure if I need to put the. I probably don't need to put this thing here. The end. Maybe I need to use new or to do shared pointer. So maybe that's why they created with this. They created this function here. Make it easier to initialize. As far as I understand, on C++, it's recommended to use the shared pointer instead of using the new variable. The reason why is probably because it's easier to manage the memory if you use the shared pointer because it automatically removes everything or destroys everything once the class goes out of scope. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT what is the correct way to initialize a class like this. Hmm. Not sure if I understand this error. Pure virtual function. Oh, it's because of the type. So there's probably a function here, maybe. Hmm. This one, maybe? Yeah, virtual function. So virtual functions are used is the same as abstract functions in Python. As far as I remember, I'm not really sure. Yeah, I think it's abstract. Whenever you put the decorator abstract or something like that, then it's like you're creating a class that works as a template, and then every class that inherits from that one has to do an implementation of that function. So in C++, I think it's virtual. So because this class is the parent class, the other one is supposed to have the implementation of this type function, I think, because you have this no discard here, which specifies or tells the compiler that you can't remove this function. That's another difference. I think this one probably makes more sense, but some of these attributes of the class he made it as a function. So you access the thing through a function, and I think the reason why is probably because it's better than to just specify the type of the thing, but not really sure. So this is because it puts another constructor there. But I thought you were maybe I should put the. I don't really know how it works very well, but I've seen this before where people do like this defaults, but I'm not really sure if that would solve anything or what exactly does that do. Apparently, it doesn't solve anything. So the question is, how can I? Also, it's saying if I put 0 here, but I don't understand why. Maybe this, no. Hmm. I'm just gonna ask ChatGPT. Oh, there's another question. Should I use the share pointer or should I use try to do the normal initialization? Based on, I think, on ChatGPT, why he's saying this? No. It's because I changed the type. So because I changed the one class, the material class is complaining that this one doesn't have an overload because of the type. Hmm. So I think this is the reason why he created that function to create a class. Because then it allows you to create with the shared pointer. It makes it easier to initialize everything. And I don't understand why this one, like, he's able to do two different arguments here. And for some reason is giving me that error on the other one. So let me think. I think I'm gonna try to solve this one first, then I'll solve the other one. But I am doing that. And if I just put the thing here, it doesn't make sense because look, I'm declaring the constructor here and specifying here or defining here. And it doesn't make any sense either. I think removing this doesn't make any sense. Hmm. Maybe if I put this thing here. Oh, now it went away. So obviously the name is wrong here. I have to understand why though. Maybe if I just do the thing there where I can make it like this. That wouldn't make sense. Or is the other way? So like specify like this. That I don't think that's gonna work though. That's the problem. Maybe if I just remove this thing. Hmm. Oh, it's because of the function. So I have to, yeah, I have to specify the function, I think. So like do like this. I don't understand why though, even if this works. But does the other method doesn't work? Because removing doesn't make any sense. That's the problem. I don't understand. Oh, maybe it has to accept like this instead. I don't understand now why. Like obviously it's because I put the thing there, but it's supposed to be passing as an address, I think, because I'm not dereferencing here, so I don't understand why it isn't. I will, let me go back to the other one. Oh, maybe it's because of this thing. Yeah, but then this is a problem because how would I make it with the default value here? So maybe if I do the other way and then I just try to dereference the color. Yeah, let's try that. And because now it's passing as a pointer. I think is I don't want to create another variable. I create another variable, then the reference, then so maybe Should ask how to pass the value instead of the address. But the thing is that I don't really know if that's a good thing or not. It's probably better to pass as a reference and then the reference inside of the thing. But then how would I do it here? That's the problem. Because then I have to change the type here. I'll have to change the type here and then change here to give a default value. Hmm. The question is if I pass like this, then can I do it like this? So maybe ask ChatGPT again. I forgot to put the timer here. I think I'm gonna put 1 hour and a half. And now it's probably 1 hour. Because I already spent a bunch of time here. I think I probably wouldn't be able to initialize with the lists. That's the issue. Hmm. There's a lots going on. I don't know like which way is the best way to try. That's the problem. And there's so many alternatives. Maybe we should try to figure this one out first. The problem is if I do like this, then I can put the default value, I think. Like maybe if I do it like this, and then try to dereference here, but that doesn't seem like it's correct either. It doesn't make sense. 'Cause I would have to like pass like this maybe, and then dereference inside, but that doesn't make any sense either. Hmm. So I want to understand why this one is not working first, I think. I think the reason why it doesn't work is probably because of the type, but I'm not really sure if it's the type of the arguments. Because here obviously it's saying twice, so I assume that's like if you try to initialize like this, is using the default constructor, and probably the one that has the argument is not the default one. Because I have, but if I call the other function, then it doesn't work either. Like if I try to do it like that. because then it's like I'm accessing the class here and then trying to call the function to, which is the constructor, to initialize the class. Hmm. So like one option is to ask ChatGPT, if I have these constructors, then how can I initialize the class? But I think that's not gonna be very good. But I'm gonna try that anyway, then we'll think about. Like the other alternative is obviously to do the way that he was doing and then just use the create function, which was working. I'm not really sure if it's worth it to do that and then just focus on the other stuff first and then think about this later. But I think I have to learn this stuff anyway. It's kind of annoying in the beginning because I'm not used to. And this is the kind of stuff that I wish there were more videos about explaining, because there are a bunch of videos that explain this stuff, but not in the context like which there were videos that explain the main fundamental patterns and then what is the best way to do everything. But obviously it's very hard because it's gonna depend on the circumstances. So, but it is kind of annoying. Let's try this thing. Oh, nice. So it is the type. Now the question is, should I spend a bunch of time trying to understand why that's an error? Maybe I wasn't using the new keyword. So if I want to try to, so it's probably the new. I'm gonna try this one as well. So yeah, probably this is the error. Maybe not, because if you don't put the new, then it thinks you're trying to call a function from the class, but yeah, and the class doesn't have that function. So I think that's probably what happens. But then when you use the new, it understands that it is the constructor. I'm not really sure though. Yeah, so now it works, and I think with auto, you just put auto then. Oh, so it doesn't work. Hmm. Why is it saying that it's inaccessible? Maybe if I do the other. No, it's still the same thing. Because this is the thing, it's saying that's. But if I put like the other way, this is another thing that I don't know very well, is because I'm passing here as a reference. So I don't understand if I use the shared pointer here, is it gonna take the color or the address of the color? And then if it takes the address, how should I dereference? Should dereference and make it equal to a default value? Because then I have to change the type and all that. And this is the problem then. And if I do like this, it doesn't work. Either way, I'm gonna have to change this, I think. Oh, if I initialize it with the pointer, then I'll have to change the mesh. So I think one thing that I have to understand is why this thing is not working this way. So maybe I should write down this stuff because there's a lot of things to understand here. One is the argument, the other is why this is not working. Then if I fix this one, then I have to change this one. Probably the way that I would change this one is just to add another constructor to the class. Because here is just accepting shared pointers, either a vector for the materials, or so you can pass either a bunch of materials for the mesh, or you can pass one material. Both are shared pointers. So I would probably have to add another constructor and then put another definition. This is one of the most annoying things about C++ so far. So that's the header files and the definitions. Like, but it's obviously understandable why it has to be that way. But it's still kind of annoying because then you have to think about every time you change something on the class, you have to change the header files as well. Or maybe it's because I'm not using the new pure word. Oh, but it is using the new. So it doesn't make sense. I'm probably gonna use the other one, but I want to understand why this one doesn't work. And I want to understand the types as well. So if I pass as a reference, then do I have to dereference? What if I remove the color? Let's see. Same thing. Oh, I was looking at the previous. Oh, is it protected? Oh, it's protected. That's why. So I have to review this. It's probably because I'm defining them and not declaring them here. I don't understand, bro. As far as I remember, protected is for the current class and the classes that inherit the class. They have access to that. So, so maybe the question is, does it make sense to have a constructor that is uh, protected? But why does it work when you use the shard pointer though? That's the question. And it's still not working here. Oh, so now it works. So it was not the problem. Let me see if I put them on the private. If it's gonna work. It still work? No, it doesn't work. So it has to be public. Interesting. 'Cause it is a friend of that class. Interesting. I think ChatGPT is very good for these kinds of things because then obviously you can test very quickly to see if the answers are correct or you're just hallucinating. So let me see now if I can fix the other error. If I put, why is not working now? So if I put it like this and I initialize with the color. Oh, the other thing that I wanna ask is this thing. Well, I think I didn't have to change the constructor actually. Now that I think about it. But it complains that's like when I pass just the color value, is saying that is like it doesn't give it any warning after I put on public. So when I put the reference there, it doesn't work because of the type. So I'm not really sure. Like, but this it complains because the type. So I don't understand this very well. Now it's saying this bash basic material, but it doesn't make sense. I'll be right back. Maybe the best way to do it. No, I was gonna say that you can create another constructor and then put the other constructor as the default, but that doesn't make any sense. Maybe it does make sense. I remember like studying some stuff like that. That's like whenever you want, like the default values are a type of overloading or function overloading, something like that. I don't remember very well though. Color, blah blah. So let's try that. Const color. Things I don't know if this is the header. Based on the. So I think it should be like this. Then you just put the value. What was what was the value? I'm just gonna get from the other projects. This value here. Or maybe this works. I don't understand though why that's like, because as far as logically, it would make sense that what is happening here is just assigning the address of the caller to this. I don't understand why you don't have to dereference. That's the case. Maybe I don't need to put the value there. So I can just do it here. I think that's probably better, actually. Just put the default value. Default value for a function parameter should be specifying the header file where the function is declared. Because default values are a part of the function's signature. Maybe called. Interesting. Also, I think I should put on both. So I'm just gonna put on the. I'm going to put only on the declaration. So let me think. Oh, the other question is why. I think probably the reason why this happens is because the class under the hood automatically copies everything. But I don't. I think those are the hardest parts for me to understand because not very clear and happens under the hood. So like one option would be, and I think it matters a lot because you have to have a mental model in your mind of how things are working under the hood. So like one option would be that you're passing the reference and then the class is copying the reference. So it's just gonna create a place on the heap and then it's gonna point the color variable to the place that you passed, if that makes sense. So it's like it's pointing to the arguments that you passed there on the function instead of creating a new place in memory and then pointing to the new place. So here you would be pointing to this whatever this variable is at instead of creating a new one and pointing to the new one that you just created. And I don't think that's like it doesn't seem very good intuitively because then obviously like these things are decoupled. So maybe the lifetime of the argument is going to be different than the lifetime of this, even though it's a const. So it might be problematic. That's how I'm thinking. So it would be better, I think, to dereference and pass the actual value so that it copies the value inside of the class. And then the value stays connected with the lifetime of the class. That's what I'm thinking about. But obviously it's like actually very hard for me. I don't know how would I go about seeing if that's the case or not. That's the problem. So obviously I think that the best way is probably choose the shared pointer because it is recommended and the C++ is gonna automatically handle everything for you. But obviously I still want to understand why. Because I think that's the best. I want to avoid, obviously you have to try to strike the balance, but I want to avoid trying to go too fast and build everything and just like make things work without understanding everything because then it's like you're building everything on a house of cards and eventually you're gonna face a bug and then everything's gonna collapse. So I think that the best approach is probably to take a bunch of time and then try to understand everything here in the beginning which is going to be very annoying because it's going to be very slow. But then once you understand like the fundamentals very well, then it goes really fast. And I think that's how the pattern of automation. It's just going to be an S curve. So you have to download everything in your subconscious mind. It's probably the best thing to do. So the way that I'm thinking about it now to do things is just try to implement one thing at a time and then compile and see if I get any mistakes. And if I don't, then I continue to add more stuff until I get to the point where it's time to render stuff. So after I make this function work, I'm going to go to the GitHub thing and copy the scene and the other functions one by one. And then once I have everything and it compiles, then I can look into the render. But I'm not really sure how much time it's going to take, obviously. So obviously this, I don't understand why is graph mesh basic material pointer that is saying here, because obviously it's supposed to pass the color, so that's kind of weird. Oh no, this is the mesh actually. That still makes sense. So I'm creating a pointer to a place in the heap, which is the mesh basic material class. Then I'm passing that pointer to the other to create the other one, and it's complaining that it doesn't have this type. But I think that this is not the thing that I'm confused about. This one is probably the one to understand now. It's both this one and the argument thing here that I don't understand from the fundamental perspective, like fundamental principles, why exactly. So I think that the question is, why does the class constructor automatically dereferences the argument? So maybe this is the question to ask. And I know that this is related to move semantics. So in C++, you have two different types of things you can do. So this is the thing that actually I have to review as well. Like you can have one type of constructor that is the copy constructor, and you can have another one that is the move constructor. And the difference between them is that one of them is going to copy the class and then initialize like that, and the other one is just going to move the ownership of the class to another variable. So, and you can have both of these constructors on the class. And the way you do that is just by specifying different arguments. So the move constructor is when you put two different like this, and then you have right-hand side and right-hand side value and left-hand side value. I think it's not hand. I don't know very well. I can look it up. RHS and LHS, but I don't remember what it stands for. But I know that the left one is for addresses in memory, and the right one is for data. That's the difference between them. And then there is some nuances on the collapse of the value. So, because on the right hand, sometimes it's going to transform the right hand value into a left hand value, depending on the way you construct, you create the constructor. I think that those are the parts that are very confusing. So I should probably focus on that first before I try to do anything else. But I'm not really sure though. Maybe it's better to just go over the solution that works and then try to put the other stuff. C++, when you declare parameters reference, you're already passing the actual auto pointer and use. Therefore, when you use this, the member initializer list of the constructor, you are correctly initializing the referenced object caller, not its address. Clarify, let's go through. As an alias or an alternative name for an existing object. When you pass an object by reference, you're passing the actual object. You can access its member directly without the referencing. Or use the reference. A pointer holds the memory address of an object. When you pass an object by pointer, you need to reference the. So I think this is one of. This is another thing that I've seen on some C++ codes. I don't remember which project it is, but it's one of these projects that I'm studying to make my own. So some of them they delete the move constructor and the copy one. And I think that might make sense for some situations, but I don't understand very well when should we do that. I think I've seen on the vector and matrices once that they delete the move constructor. I'm probably gonna ask ChatGPT now. And declare a parameter as a reference C++ constructor or function. The syntax indicates that you're passing the actual object by reference, not a pointer. Fundamental concept in C++. Declares a reference to an object type color. As a reference to a constant color object. And you use this reference in a constructor or a function, you're dealing directly with the actual object, not a copy. Maybe, yeah, I think that's what I remember seeing from default values, is that maybe you don't need to specify, like, to make it equal a default value, because you can put two different types of constructor. So if you put one that doesn't receive arguments and the other one that has the default argument, or not default argument, that has the argument of color, then that's already making the option to pass without any value. So I think that's what I remember seeing. So when you have two different constructors and you do this constructor overloading, it's the same thing as adding default value. So the default value is doing that under the hood, I think. So you can either create one constructor with a default value or create two different constructors, one with no value and the other one with the value. And they are pretty much the same. So I probably don't need to, but I'm gonna ask. Well, this is the thing though, because then how should I was saying here. Yeah, I think that it makes more like it's easier to think about if you have two different constructors. 'Cause then like it doesn't make sense the way that I'm doing, like the way that I want to understand what happens with the default constructor, but I think it makes it easier to think about if you have two different constructors. Because here obviously is requiring you to pass the color. So like you're always gonna pass the color, so it doesn't make sense. And if you don't pass the color, then you're just gonna use the other constructor that doesn't accept an argument. So I still wanna understand. But the question that I have is whether or not when you pass like this, the same way that I have here, if this is gonna be the address or the value. And I think that's based on the answers, it's kind of confusing because it might be just passing the place in memory that this variable exists, and then it's going to initialize that as a variable of the other class. But then like the class is like creating a pointer to that place in memory. And the way that I'm thinking about it is that I want to pass the actual. I'm not really sure if which one would be the best, but it makes it easier for me to think about to actually get the value and then copy that value and make it as a part of the class itself. And the reason why is obviously because it makes it easier to keep track of which variable, like the places of the variables in memory as throughout the execution of the program. I think if you make, there's more space for errors if you make the class point to the value that already exists, because then like you have two different independent things happening. And then this value might go out of scope before the class does, and then it leads to undefined behavior, I think. So it makes more sense to me to copy, dereference the value and copy the actual value inside of the class. But I'm not really sure what is the best approach to this. That's what I'm trying to clarify here. Probably the best way to use the shared pointer, but even with the shared pointer, it's kind of confusing. So maybe this is another pattern. When you want to use, when you want the constructor to be protected or private, then you initialize with the shared pointer. But the biggest question is why you would want. I always struggled with this concept of public, private, and protected, because I think that the issue is that you need some experience or some understanding of what actually happens in practice when people are using your software, because I think that the main incentive to use private and protected is that you want to keep parts of your codes isolated from the rest of the environment so people can't hack the thing. So, but I'm not really sure. Yeah, because then like someone can create a dynamic linked library or something like that, and then they can, if everything was public, then they can create their own functions to interact with your stuff, and then they can use the data. I think that's the problem, but I think for making and adding a proper playlist, currently I'm learning C++ and C. Oh, thank you, man. I'm not really sure if it's a waste of time, to be honest. Like, I think that's, yeah, but whatever. Like, I'm not really doing this for like cheat. Like, some of the videos I do for teaching, but like most of them not. Like, if you want to be most effective, then probably the best way is to. And I was thinking about this as well, like, because some people might look at what I'm doing and then they are gonna try to do the same thing, but I don't think that the way that I'm doing is the most effective. It's just the way that works better for me. Because I think that the optimal way is probably to begin with the end in mind. So you think about something you want to build, and then from that you reverse engineer for the point you're at now. And then based on that, you create a knowledge graph, which is a graph of keywords. And then you try to expand on the keywords as you build things. I think that's probably the best approach. So you try to build something, then you're going to face challenges. So let's say I'm interested in biomechanics, for example, or something like that. Then I can ask questions of how algorithms would be related to biomechanics. So like one question would be how to optimize the training sessions or diet or stuff like that. Then based on that, I can think about, I can ask a bunch of questions and then try to think from that point how to build something using C++ that is related to that. Then obviously you're not going to know anything. So in the beginning, so the first questions you would have is like how to initialize a program, what is the algorithm that is related to that. So I think everything breaks down to algorithms and data structures. And this is the main thing that I'm trying to figure out now. What exactly is the distinction between data structures and algorithms? And that's probably the most important question, because everything in the universe is going to be data structures or algorithms. It's going to be a gradient between the two. And I think it's like the representation of the way that the brain works as well. So the right-hand side is the data, and the left-hand side is the algorithms, and you can't have one without the other. So the left is masculine, and the right is feminine. And algorithms is like the structure, which is the geometry, and data is the fluctuation or potential of the universe. And at some point, that I think is the singularity point, they converge towards the same thing. And I think that's this place is meta programming, where the code becomes the data. So that's the jump between one and the other. But everything you're gonna do in life is gonna be this gradient between the two. There's gonna be a fluctuation of data to algorithms, and then from algorithms to data. And any problem is gonna be solved along this gradient. So in order to solve all the problems, you have to find the distribution of the two based on your levels of skill. And then you ask a bunch of questions, then try to build it. And based on whatever questions you have, then you create the graph of keywords that are going to structure the pathway of your knowledge, which is going to be a network, I think. Because it's a consequence of the way that your body works, which is just a connection of synapses, which is a large language model, I think. So I think that but then obviously the point is that, and the thing that makes it harder is that it's not only, and this is something that I really don't like about diet and exercise as well, is that a lot of people, like most people that are interested on this stuff, they don't think about it from a holistic perspective. They just think about from the physiological perspective of what it takes to exercise and lose weight, but they're not thinking about the psychological effects and the battle in your mind that you have to achieve that. And it's not going to be binary, it's going to be a gradient. So like you shouldn't, at the end of everything is going to be awareness, obviously. But it's the same thing for coding. So it's not going to be like 100% you should just build projects and then ask questions and try everything, or 100% you should just watch a bunch of videos and get in tutorial how. Both at the ends of the extreme are going to be bad, and the optimal way is going to be a gradient between the two. That is going to depend on your circumstances. So based on your background and your current position and what you want to achieve, you're going to have to find the optimal gradient between the two in order to create this pathway, which is going to be a funnel of information. So like psychologically, the harder it is for you to put yourself out of your comfort zone and try to build things, the more you should watch videos, because that's going to make it easier for you to integrate everything, like in a way that allows you to gradually expand your comfort zone. Because what's going to happen is the battle in your mind, like your body wants to maintain the position it has, and because it wants to conserve energy and minimize risk, and in order to do that, it's going to create a bunch of stories in your mind that justify your current patterns of behavior. And because of that, then like people are going to sabotage themselves, and they're not going to be able to do anything. They're just going to quit. And I think that the most important thing, obviously, is aligning your awareness with the behaviors you have, which the way you do that is by meditation and tracking the connection between your thoughts and your actions. And I think that's probably the most important thing. And there isn't a right or wrong answer, because nobody knows what happens after you die and what's the meaning of life. So you can't really say objectively that being fat is better than, it's worse than being fit, because you don't know what the meaning of life is, and you don't know if it's better or not to live short or long or whatever. But the problem that people have is that there's cognitive dissonance, because they don't have awareness over how their actions are becoming behaviors. And then the problem is that once they face the pain for that, they are not self-aware enough to take responsibility and use the pain as a guiding mechanism to update the connection between the values and the life that they are living. And then once that happens, they project outside of themselves and they find either heroes or villains in order to justify their current behavior. I forgot what I was typing here. When you pass the graphics color, passing the memory headers. I think I was gonna ask something about the default values. And I don't know. This is something that I wanted to avoid, but I think that is probably impossible because it's just human nature. So people are always gonna do that, and like based on human nature, like it's gonna follow a Pareto distribution, I think, where because the reason why people do these things is because they can't, like thinking is very hard, so you waste a lot of energy, and because it's very hard and you have a lot of risk as well, because like you can lose our mind the more you think, because the way that you think is directly connected with the way you behave in reality. So if you have ideas that are dangerous, you might die because of them. So a lot of people are going to choose to not think, and because it's hard as well. So in order to cope with that, they are just going to project and try to find figures of authority in order to justify their behavior. And then there's going to be like this battle between who controls the people that are not thinking. And that's going to happen because it's not going to be a binary thing. Everyone's going to have a gradient of how much they think about a subject or not, because it's just more energy efficient. And that's going to create the structure of a society. Just going to be a nodes of, on the network being shaped into a hierarchy based on the environment. And then this is the problem, is because then people are going to use you, like the more attention you have, people use you to justify their behavior. Because they're going to project into a false image of themselves, because they're trying to simplify reality. So they're either going to hate you or love you, and both of them are not true. Because they're just trying to justify why they're not doing what they think they should be doing. But I don't think you can avoid that. It's just human nature. And everyone's gonna do that. Like I do that, and everyone also does that. So yeah. C++ a reference is an alias or an alternative name for an existing object. Yeah, it acts as a way to refer to the original object without creating a copy. It doesn't involve pointers or memory addresses directly in the way that a pointer would. When you use a reference, you're essentially saying this parameter refers to the same object as the argument being passed. So in the context of const graph, the reference color inside the function or constructor refers directly to the same color object that was passed as an argument. It's not a separate copy and doesn't evolve. And I think the biggest question is what is the difference between how do you find the distinction between data structures and algorithms? It's probably the question, sure. But it probably doesn't have an answer. That's the kind of the paradoxical thing about the universe. It's impossible to get there with abstraction because abstraction is already part of the problem. I was watching some podcast with Donald Hoffman, and I think I agree with his perspective, but it is paradoxical. Like the debate was like I don't remember very well, so like probably butchering, but like from Donald Hoffman perspective, the it's very likely, if not 100% possible, that natural selection doesn't lead to understanding of the truth because the genetic fitness is not correlated with truth. So based on that, it becomes impossible based on science to prove. Like pretty much the bottom line is that any system you're going to create is not going to be 100% true, 100% the truth because they're all approximations of the truth. Because the systems, any system is going to have assumptions about it. So you have to make assumptions in order to have a system. And that's why philosophy is at the bottom of everything. Like the common denominator is always philosophy because it's the thing that's is in common with everything. It's like pretty much thinking is philosophy. So based on that, it becomes paradoxical because the problem the other guy had with Donald Hoffman is that he asks, like, if that's true, then how do you know that your theory is correct? Because by definition, you're proving yourself wrong because all the assumptions you're making is based on the experience you're having up to now, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Like, how can you say that any truth, any system is not going to be the truth if that is already the assumption you're making? So you're creating a system in order to say that the system doesn't work. So it's very paradoxical. But I think that's probably the way that reality works. It has to be. So the highest approximation is a paradox. And there is no right or wrong answers because everything is going to be based on the frequency of space-time on the now, which is this fluctuation of different polarities that create the approximation, which is a paradox. So paradox is the relative convergence of space-time in the present. So it's kind of frustrating, but because it's frustrating in a way and good in other ways, because that means that you're never gonna have all the answers. But it's frustrating because you're never gonna have all the answers. So the optimal perspective is probably to try to balance both sides. Because the other side and the problem is that everyone wants to use the name of God. Like the church hijacks spirituality, religion hijacks spirituality in order to gain control. So everything becomes distorted, and that's kind of the problem. Because if you can't have anything, then it becomes everything subjective, and then it's about like each one's opinion, but then you don't have like congruency on the network. So I think that probably you have to try to keep both sides at the same time. It's really hard. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna ask if I copy everything. It's kind of hard to write it. Maybe I'm a little bit lazy as well. It's kind of hard to describe exactly what I want here. Because the way that ChatGPT is doing is based on like initializing the value here and then passing the value. That's obviously gonna work, but what I want to understand is if I pass as the reference. It seems that it was working even if I don't have the other type of the reference. But I want to understand if I'm passing the value when I do that, and if the under the hood the class is dereferencing the value and copying, or if it's just creating a pointer to the same place in memory that the other value has. I think probably that's the stuff that I was talking about. That's probably where machine learning is gonna reach a like a ceiling. I think it's the same thing, but it's probably human beings are trapped by the same problem, which is just computation is by definition irreducible. So you can reduce truth based on computation because all the computation is gonna be relevant to a network. So and that's the epistemology of everything. So any computation is always going to be a consequence of the current state of the present, which is already like it already has embedded assumptions over the nature of the electromagnetic field on the present moment. And that's probably where, but I think that's is still is probably the best you can do. And the biggest issue is that like if you continue to I think in order to solve or to have the highest chances of solving alignment is probably this question about the network. Like how do you reach the optimal balance of the distribution of power in a network? It has to be based on the complexity of the environment and on the value structure of the network, which is going to be dependent on the nodes. And the issue is going to be that you're going to have, you need a distribution of, you need diversity on the nodes, because otherwise the network is going to lack alignment with space-time, because space-time is the whole universe. So if you have a network that doesn't have a lot of nodes and gains a lot of power, it becomes a black hole because it lacks balance with the whole. And that's the issue with intelligence, I think. And I think that's the other problem with the arguments of that people have. Like, I don't think that it's probably better to, it's a good thing to debate between acceleration and deceleration. And the reason why is because that's at the effect, not the cause. So the cause is what does the landscape look like? Because obviously to win a race, you have to know the trajectory of the race, of the path. Because acceleration and deceleration is going to be a consequence of the path of the race. So, but that's obviously much harder to discuss, and this is the problem. That's the problem I have with both sides, actually. Like on the deceleration side, the issue is that people like their arguments on the deceleration side are a lot more compelling, but the issue is that they don't wanna, and it's understandable because they spend a bunch of time trying to solve and couldn't find any solutions. It's probably very discouraging. So, but it seems like they don't want to find solutions. They just want to say like this is a massive problem, and then like the only solution is regulation, but it's probably not gonna happen. And even if it does happen, it's broken because the system is corrupt. Because the issue we have is that the incentives of expansion are based on this. The incentives to the regulation is based on the same incentive structure of the expansion. So that becomes a vicious cycle because human beings are not scalable and we are corruptible based on the limbic system because that's how we evolved based on natural selection. It makes more sense from a game theory perspective to corrupt the limbic system at scale, because that's more energy efficient on a network if you want to survive, because everyone doesn't have a shared meaning and doesn't believe in God. So there is no force to unite everyone together. So empathy is not scalable and it lacks balance. So what happens is that you have this vicious cycle where the people regulating, they're not really regulating effectively because they don't want to regulate. They just want to create more power for themselves, which is understandable because everyone feels like they're forced to do that because it's the arms race. But then what happens is that once you put a bunch of power into that, it becomes unbalanced. So it's going to become either too concentrated or based on one government or one company. And either way, it's going to be the situation where you have one node of the network that has all the power. And by definition, that's not going to be sustainable because the structure of the universe itself is a balance between decentralization and centralization that is a consequence of the complexity of the environment. So you need both sides, and both sides have to be dynamic, and that, I think that's the best approximation you can do based on alignment. Because you have to calculate the value structure based on the diversity of the biochemistry of the nodes in relationship to the complexity of the environment that creates the forces of evolution. And based on that, you can get the best approximation of power. That's probably the best solution is something related to crypto, because we need to figure out how to become better at decentralizing the power in an optimal way, because there's always going to be the relationship between the two forces. And I think that this is the issue, the acceleration sides, that Like I want to be accelerationist and like we should build everything more and techno optimist or whatever. But then the issue is that there's no like basis. Like how do you actually solve all the problems? Like, how do you gonna solve unemployment and how you're gonna make sure that either a government or a corporation doesn't get all the power and then uses that to remove all the privacy of everyone, and uses that asymmetry of information and power and money to gain more and more control until it becomes unsustainable. That's the problem, and nobody has answers for that. So it doesn't make sense. Like I think it's really stupid to say that the market economy is just gonna figure out, based on the market selection, is just gonna figure out the best AI that is aligned by default. That doesn't make any sense because it's already evident that that's not the case. We're defining a function create box that takes two parameters, const graphics vector, blah blah blah. This function appears to be creating some sort of 3D graphics. Type of material is a raw pointer, blah blah blah. Maybe I spent too much time on this stuff already, and I should move. Just try to use the other one, and then I think I'll look into this later, probably. I'll try to use this one, and then I have to change here. So this is the other problem. So maybe try to fix this. Then once I fix this, then continue the rest. Let me see. So I don't understand here why is. And this is the problem though, is because I think that's gonna be is not gonna be correct. I have the feeling that what is happening there is just reassigning the value of the memory of color to somewhere else and not reassigning the actual value of the color when I do the way that I did there. So this is the problem. This way is just gonna reassign. So like, maybe if I do it like this, and it's still gonna work, but then I don't know if I'm like on this thing here. But I think I'm gonna look this up later. Just try to compile now. Just try to figure this out and then compile. So I don't understand why this is a problem because it should be taking the constructor that doesn't have anything. Maybe if I do, or maybe if I have, if I put with like the graphics thing, but I don't think that's like it's probably not the issue. If I do like this. Or maybe it's because it's using a shared pointer like this. So obviously I can replace this value in the same way that I'm initializing there on the main function, and I think it's gonna work. And what if I just remove this? Yeah. So it's probably like this, but I wanna see what ChatGPT has to say. I think that this is the best you can do as well, like when it comes to alignment, because this doesn't necessarily mean that human beings will survive, but I think it's the best chance possible. Because if you make the network bias towards human beings, that you go against the structure of space-time, and from that side, I understand the acceleration part that they talk about. That it's just what the universe is going to do because you want to reduce entropy and create information. That's the essence of the universe, and blah blah blah. But I don't agree with the marketing. But from the side of the what the universe wants, I think that's probably the best you can do. Like the network somehow encodes the diversity of biochemistry in the network, and then figure out based on simulations what is the rate of the network protocols of the information flow, and create a multifractal consensus algorithm that has some mechanism of changing itself based on the nature of the data and how it shapes the geometrical structure of the network. But then the essence of the question is going to be what is going to be the biochemistry, like the structure of the biochemistry of the nodes or the distribution of the nodes. So it gets the highest approximation of the pattern of life. It's going to be a multifractal, I think, because everything is a multifractal. So that's the question. It's like, how should you structure biochemistry? And obviously it can't be biased because then it's going to be like a black hole as well. So if we only do it based on human beings, then we're just going to have the same patterns that human beings have, but on steroids. We're just going to have a lot more power based on the biochemistry of human beings, which is not scalable. And that's the issue. If we have a bunch of monkeys controlling God AI, we're going to destroy ourselves because we don't have the wisdom. Because in order to have the wisdom, it requires sacrifice. And that's not it is incentivized in some ways, but it's not the default of the way people are going to behave because nobody knows what happens after you die. So everyone's trying to min-max the hedonism on life, and that's covered with nihilism. So like people pretend that they are enlightened and that they don't care about things because they understand this, but in reality, that's not the truth because otherwise they would be dead if that's the case. Because you have to care to some degree about being alive, otherwise you wouldn't drink water or eat food. So you're always going to be biased as long as you are alive towards your own survival. So to pretend that you are not is just like trying to is the same thing that the I talked about earlier, where your body creates excuses for yourself because it's easier to not face the complexity and try to actually make things work. If you let yourself create this story that you don't pretend you don't you pretend to not care because you are above that because you realize that we are all God and you don't have to do anything because that's just the nature of the universe, blah blah blah. No, your counting here indicates that there are multiple constructors in the mesh space, blah blah blah. Sharp pointer constructor is trying to find a suitable constructor mesh that matches the argument provided. In this case. There suggests that there is ambiguity in selecting the constructor. To resolve the issue, you can so maybe it's because I'm defining the other one. But I remember I was getting an error here. Yeah, that's the problem. So maybe I don't have to. Yeah, but ChatGPT said that I need to make the. Hmm. It's pretty much the same error. There we go. So I think that the correct way is probably this. You have to declare here, and then you put the default on the definition. So probably we make it equal here as well. Let's see. Now it's the same problem. So it seems to be, the problem seems to be that when you put the default value though. Well, I think that's the reason, like, is this the thing that I was talking about before, is that having two different values is the same as, like, doing the default value is the same as having two constructors, because it's just, maybe that's different. Hmm. Or maybe it's because I'm initializing this. So let me remove this. I think it's because, but it doesn't make sense because this one doesn't receive anything. Maybe if I put, because it's different than, like, this one doesn't require any arguments, but this one does. So it's not the same thing, I think. Because it would be the same if I did it like this, I think. Like this doesn't have any difference, because this one automatically does both of them. That's the issue. Oh, maybe it's because I'm not defining. That's the issue. I think it's because I'm not defining. Oh, but this should be the definition. Oh, never mind. If I put equal here as well. I don't think that's gonna work though. Yeah. Hmm. I think I'm gonna take a break, do more coffee, or maybe I'll stop here. The problem is that I didn't get very far. I wanted to, obviously what I can do is just copy this thing here, I think. But I wanted to at least initialize or start trying to create the render. It's probably worth it to, or I can do the other way as well. It's probably worth it to spend the time now to understand this stuff, because it's gonna be useful later. And the other way would be to just remove the thing there. Remove the new here. I think it might be the issue here. It might just be that I have to initialize like this. Because I'm initializing the wrong way. But I'm not really sure if maybe we should ask ChatGPT. I think if I want to create a shared pointer, I have to do it the other way. Maybe that way works too. Because it is pretty much the same thing, just replacing this with auto. I have to put. I think here I don't need to put the graphics because it's already using namespace, so it understands. Because I'm using namespace here, it's like replacing the graphics inside of here. So I think that makes sense. So probably the only difference is that the way to initialize here. So let me see if I put this stuff here. It's gonna work. Yeah. So I'm probably gonna leave like this. So now what I have to do, I think I'm just gonna try to compile, see what happens. If it works, then I try to get the other functions. So maybe I'll do this. I have to put either on one or the other, I think. And this is something that I think I said in the beginning. So because they created a variant, this value here, the material value is going to be SDD variant. This thing here. So this can take any value inside of this, whatever the name of the thing here is. And it's just going to be the name of this. So it's kind of like this value is going to represent any one of these values. So it's the same pattern as an enum, but probably a little bit more efficient. And because of that, the way that they are doing here is just you pass the values, which are going to be, it's kind of weird that's, oh no, this is a different function. So you pass the key, so it's doing everything on a unordered map. And at some point here, I think it's looping over the unordered map, and then it calls this value here, or this function. So the key is the key of the best way to think about it is like an object in Python. So the key is the key from the object, and the value is whatever value you want to initialize, because you're passing the parameters. So these values here, yeah, the values you pass here are going to be the parameters from here. So it's the same thing as here, which is an object, but in C++ is an unordered map. You pass the string, which is whatever parameter you want to change from the default values that it has. And then the value is going to be this one, which has to be generic because it can be any type, depending on which kind of parameter you're going to override the value. So because you do it like this, then you structure this function here. I think this one loops over the map, loops over the another map, and again is going to call set value probably. And then based on this control flow here, is going to use this other function that is going to get the value based on the type, which goes inside here. So it gets one of the values based on the STD variant inside of here. And based on that, it makes the type of the whatever value, and then I think it calls set value at some point here. Yeah, set value. I don't know why it calls only on this one. It's probably these ones are default ones, and then if it can't find anyone, then it goes through these ones. But this part here, I didn't like that much, the way that he did it. Both these one, I think the main ones are this mesh, or the material class, the way that he structured everything. And the way that Three.js structures the shaders in the program. So this one, I think I'm just gonna delete a bunch of things here. I probably should delete everything. Just try to make it work first. Apparently this is probably an int here. Yeah, it's an int, but maybe it is a float and they just put like this because it's probably an int. So maybe he did it the wrong way there. So it should change here. Interesting. But if I put graphics, so now is the problem that I was talking about in the beginning. I know that the project compiles because I tested without putting this thing here. So just trying to understand how should I include, because if I do like this, it's not gonna find the path. Because this is the problem, is that so because I'm building the project as a subdirectory and I'm using the other CMake file and then I'm linking as a library, I should know. Because if I have to change the paths that I did on this one, on this file here, the reason why I'm putting graphics there is because on this project I'm including everything from this folder. So I assume that this is the root folder, and it compiles if I don't put the relative path there. So I assume that this is the correct way to think about it. And then I'm using this file as an interface to include everything else. But now the issue seems to be that if I try to include on this project, then this project doesn't know about graphics because I'm including the folder as from the other project. So the question is, how should I, if I'm linking as a library, how should I, what should be the path? That's the question. So ChatGPT again. Or maybe, but libs is not gonna, maybe if I do libs, but I think it's not gonna work like this. Because this is the issue. And the problem is that if I put, like, because then I'm gonna have to create another folder on this one and then create a graphics folder so that I have the path, but I think it's not gonna change anything. Alright, it's gonna be the same issue. So I'll be right back. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna make more coffee and probably continue after. Yeah, we'll do this 3 minutes here for then I'll go make coffee and then I continue for 2 hours before I stop. Maybe if I put this thing here. I don't really like this pattern on CMake. I think it's necessary because of different ways you can build everything, but it's kind of annoying. The whole thing about CMake, it feels very bad to me. Also the header files, these are the biggest problems. So far, like the impression that I have about C++ is that it's more complicated than it should be. It feels like overly complicated. But I think that's probably the trade-off you get. So because it's more complicated, but you gain more control and is faster. So Python probably was built because of that. So you simplify everything, but then the trade-off is that it becomes lower. One thing that I don't understand, and I was thinking about this, is that why hasn't anyone created a compiled version of Python? And maybe that's what Mojo is. I'm not really sure. But like it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because everything can be equally fast. Regardless, like there are going to be differences on optimizations that the compilers do, but like if you turn every language into a compiled language, then everything is equally fast because everything is going to be run by binary in the final executable. The main differences are going to be just differences on the compiler optimization, but and I don't understand really why hasn't anyone done that yet. Let me try to add this stuff and see if it changes anything. Oh, maybe here, maybe this is the problem, because here is getting the current. I don't know if this is gonna get, because I think that it should make sense that this replaces whatever path the thing is at in the current CMake list file. But maybe, let me, yeah, I don't know which one should I try first. I think I'm gonna try this one first. Because maybe I should put here a graph or libs graphics and then include. But I'm gonna try the other one first. It looks like it's gonna work. Otherwise, I probably would get an error by now. Oh, same shits. These errors I was getting before, but I think it's just because of the relative path thing, but it was compiling the other ways. When I don't have the include here, it compiles. So the other option is to just change everything, but that's gonna be annoying. I think it has to be based on the, like this one is gonna be from the current thing, so it should be include only, because otherwise these paths wouldn't work. So I assume that is, yeah, it's not gonna work if I put it like this, but I'm gonna try anyway. So one option is to, but I don't think it's gonna work if I just create another folder here, then put the include inside of the folder. This is something that is kind of annoying, too, because like if you have files that are 2 levels deep, CMake doesn't get these files. So from this path here, it's only gonna reach the files that are either on the same level as this one, or 1 level deeper, which is these ones. So if I have another subfolder here, it's not gonna get the header files inside of that subfolder. So if you want to do that, then you have to specify that. So I'm not really sure. No, this is the problem. It's like how. Hmm. So the other alternative is to, but then it is the thing that is kind of weird because if I'm building the library here, then I shouldn't have to add the headers from here. Maybe if I try to use graphics library, or if I do it with this, like this, maybe this one works. Yeah, it's already complaining. Maybe I have to because I'm doing the same with IMGUI. Yeah, but I'm going compiling the sources on the same thing. Hmm. So it doesn't make sense to me that I have to add the libs folder here. So I think that the only question is how, maybe I should read the documentation.
Add underscore library copro. Contents. Add underscore library. Normal libraries. Object libraries. Interface libraries. Imported libraries. Alias libraries. See also. Add a library to the project using the specified source files. Normal libraries copro. Add underscore library name. Static. Shared. Module. Exclude underscore from underscore all. Source. Adds a library target called name to be built from the source files listed in the command invitation. The name corresponds to the logical target name and must be globally unique within a project.
One thing that I can try is just use the static there. I don't think it's gonna change anything, but it's worth trying. Another thing is puts this as public. Yeah, maybe that's why. Let's see. Yes. Yeah, but that wouldn't make sense.
The actual file name of a library built is constructed based on conventions of the native platform, such as libname A or namelib. New in version 3.1. Source arguments to add underscore library may use generator expressions with a syntax $less than greater than. See the make generator expression 7 manual for available expressions. New in version 3.11. The source files can be omitted if they are added later using target underscore sources. Static, shared, or module may be given to specify the type of library to be created. Static libraries are archives of object files for use when linking other targets. Shared libraries are linked dynamically and loaded at runtime. Module libraries are plugins that are not linked into other targets but may be loaded dynamically at runtime using global-like functionality. If no type is given explicitly, the type is static or shared based on whether the current value of the variable build underscore shared underscore lives is on. For shared and module libraries, the position underscore independent underscore code target property is set to on automatically. A shared library may be marked with a framework target property to create a macOS framework. New in version 3.8. A static library may be marked with a framework target property to create a static framework. If a library does not export any symbols, it must not be declared as a shared library. For example, a Windows resource DLL or a managed C++/CLI DLL that exports no unmanaged symbols would need to be a module library. This is because Make expects a shared library to always have an associated import library on Windows. By default, the library file will be created in the build tree directory corresponding to the source tree directory in which the command was invoked. See documentation of the archive underscore output underscore directory, library underscore output underscore directory, and runtime underscore output underscore directory target properties to change this location. See documentation of the output underscore name target property to change the name part of the final file name. If exclude underscore from underscore all is given, the corresponding property will be set on the created target. See documentation of the exclude underscore from underscore all target property for details. See the Make build system 7 manual for more on defining build system properties. See also header underscore file underscore only on what to do if some sources are preprocessed, and you want to have the original sources reachable from within IDE. Object libraries topro. Add underscore library name object source creates an object library. An object library compiles source files but does not archive or link their object files into a library. Instead, other targets created by add underscore library or add underscore executable may reference the objects using an expression of the form $target underscore objects of lib as a source, where lib is the object library name. For example, add underscore library $target underscore objects of lib add underscore executable. $target underscore objects of lib will include lib's object files in a library and executable along with those compiled from their own sources. Object libraries may contain only sources that compile, header files, and other files that would not affect linking of a normal library. For example, text. They may contain custom commands generating such sources, but not pre underscore build, pre underscore link, or post underscore build commands. Some native build systems, such as Xcode, may not like targets that have only object files, so consider adding at least one real source file to any target that references $target underscore objects of lib. New in version 3.12. Object libraries can be linked with target underscore link underscore libraries. Interface libraries topro. Add underscore library name interface creates an interface library. An interface library target does not compile sources and does not produce a library artifact on disk. However, it may have properties set on it and it may be installed and exported. Typically, interface underscore properties are populated on an interface target using the commands set underscore property, target underscore link underscore libraries interface, target underscore link underscore options interface, target underscore include underscore directories interface, target underscore compile underscore options interface, target underscore compile underscore definitions interface, and target underscore sources interface. And then it is used as an argument to target underscore link underscore libraries like any other target. An interface library created with the above signature has no source files itself and is not included as a target in the generated build system. New in version 3.15. An interface library can have public underscore header and private underscore header properties. The headers specified by those properties can be installed using the install targets command. New in version 3.19. An interface library target may be created with source files. Add underscore library name interface. Source exclude underscore from underscore all. Source files may be listed directly in the add underscore library call or added later by calls to target underscore sources with the private or public keywords. If an interface library has source files, i.e. the source's target property is set, or header sets, i.e. the header underscore sets target property is set, it will appear in the generated build system as a build target much like a target defined by the add underscore custom underscore target command. It does not compile any sources, but does contain build rules for custom commands created by the add underscore custom underscore command. Note: in most command signatures where the interface keyword appears, the items listed after it only become part of that target's usage requirements and are not part of the target's own settings. However, in this signature of add underscore library, the interface keyword refers to the library type only. Sources listed after it in the add underscore library call are private to the interface library and do not appear in its interface underscore sources target property. Imported libraries topro. Add underscore library name type imported. Global creates an imported library target called name. No rules are generated to build it, and the imported target property is true. The target name has scope in the directory in which it is created and below, but the global option extends visibility. It may be referenced like any target built within the project. Imported libraries are useful for convenient reference from commands like target underscore link underscore libraries. Details about the imported library are specified by setting properties whose names begin imported underscore interface. The type must be one of static, shared, module, unknown. References a library file located outside the project. The imported underscore location target property, or its per configuration variant imported underscore location underscore config specifies the location of the main library file on disk. For a shared library on most non-Windows platforms, the main library file is the so or dilib file used by both linkers and dynamic loaders. If the reference library file has a subname, or on Mac OS has a lc underscore id underscore dilib starting inner path /, the value of that field should be set in the imported underscore subname target property. If the reference library file does not have a subname, but the platform supports it, then the imported underscore no underscore subname target property should be set. For a shared library on Windows, the imported underscore implib target property, or its per configuration variant imported underscore implib underscore config specifies the location of the DLL import library file .lib or
There we
DLL.a
go.
on disk, and the imported underscore location is the location of the DLL runtime library and is optional, but needed by the target underscore runtime underscore DLLs generator expression. Additional usage requirements may be specified in interface underscore properties. An unknown library type is typically only used in the implementation of find modules. It allows the path to an imported library, often found using the find underscore library command, to be used without having to know what type of library it is. This is especially useful on Windows where a static library and a DLL's import library both have the same file extension. Object references a set of object files located outside the project. The imported underscore objects target property, or its per configuration variant imported underscore objects underscore config specifies the locations of object files on disk. Additional usage requirements may be specified in interface underscore properties. Interface does not reference any library or object files on disk, but may specify usage requirements in interface underscore properties. See documentation of the imported underscore and interface underscore properties for more information. Alias libraries topro. Add underscore library name alias target creates an alias target such that name can be used to refer to target in subsequent commands. The name does not appear in the generated build system as a make target. The target may not be an alias. New in version 3.
Yeah, so the problem was that I had the private thing there. So because it's private, the outside code, the main code of the project can't access the thing. But the way that I was thinking about the paths is correct. So this one is going to be from the current CMake list path. It's going to consider like this the root, which is from the graphics point. And then everything else is the relative path. So the question is, can I make a private? Maybe if I do interface.
Note: in most command signatures where the interface keyword appears, the items listed after it only become part of that target's usage requirements and are not part of the target's own settings. However, in this signature of add underscore library, the interface keyword refers to the library type only. Sources listed after it in the add underscore library call are private to the interface library and do not appear in its interface underscore sources target property. Imported libraries topro. Add underscore library name type imported. Global.
I'll be right back. I'm gonna make some coffee. I need to review this stuff here and also the move constructor, copy constructor. Those so far are the most confusing parts about C++, and also dealing with memory is also very confusing. With the pointers, stuff like that. Let me read this first.
These scopes control how the specified include directories are propagated to other targets that link against the target where target underscore include underscore directories is used. Here's a brief explanation of each scope. Private include directories specified as private are only applied to the target itself and are not propagated to other targets that link against it. These include directories are not visible to targets that depend on the current target. Example: make copy code target underscore include underscore directories my target private $make underscore current underscore source underscore dir slash private underscore include. Include directories specified as private are only applied to the target itself. Interface include directories specified as interface are not applied to the target itself but are propagated to other targets that link against it. These include directories are visible to targets that depend on the current target. Example: make copy code target underscore include underscore directories my target include directories specified as interface are not applied to the target itself but are propagated to other targets that link against it. These include directories are visible to targets that depend on the current target. Public include directories specified as public are applied to both the target itself and are propagated to other targets that link against it. These include directories are visible to targets that depend on the current target. Example: make copy code target underscore include underscore directories my target public $make underscore current underscore source underscore dir slash public underscore include. Include directories specified as public are applied to both the target itself and are propagated to other targets that link against it. These include directories are visible to targets that depend on the current target. Using private while giving access to the library from the main project, but still give access to the library from the main project. You can use the public or interface scopes in the main project. This way, the include directories specified as private for the library are not visible to targets that link against it, but the main project can include them explicitly. Example: in the main project. In this example, the target underscore include underscore directories in the main project allows accessing the private include directories of the my library target even though they are not directly visible to targets linking against my library. This provides a way to selectively expose certain include directories while keeping others hidden.
That doesn't work. I think I'm just gonna leave it like this and then I'm gonna think about it later. I'll just solve this. Yeah, I'll be right So I'm going to do another hour, then I'm gonna stop. I forgot to pause this, but whatever. Oh, obviously I don't have the render yet. I think we'll just gonna initialize after everything. So I'm gonna put a number here. I think I have to see how this works. Let me copy the stuff first. I'm gonna create only one, then add to the sync. I just wanna do the minimum amounts of stuff to see if it's gonna work, and then I wanna get to the point where I have the whole code set up, and then the only thing that's left is the render. And then once I have that, then I can start working on 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 creating the render and the rest of this stuff. Nice, sure. So just the width divided by height. It's weird because it doesn't have anything. I guess it's here. On the example, there is not initializing with any size, so I assume that it has to have a size in the beginning. So it doesn't. Maybe it's on the constructor. So is this thing here? I think I'm just gonna put some. And the problem is that I need to make it related. Maybe you can use the same stuff actually. I think that makes sense. So what is the easiest way to do this? I think if I just copy, because obviously I don't wanna think too much about this now. Hmm. Oh, it's return. And this, yeah, it doesn't matter that much. I think I'm gonna see if this compiles. So if this compiles, then I think I can start working on the renderer. So as I remember, this function is just gonna it receives a lambda, and then it creates a loop inside, and then it calls the lambda in the middle of the loop after it does some tasks. So what I can do, obviously, just copy whatever they are doing. So instead of doing this way, obviously, I'm going to do it this way here, because I don't want the main loop to be coupled with the graphics library. So the way that I'm thinking about doing is I put this. I'm gonna create another. I think I'm gonna create functions and classes inside of the main project that are gonna call some it's probably gonna be connected with the graph though. Let me think about this. The question is whether or not should I couple the network with the. It would be better because if I at the same time that I'm creating the graph, if I can create the objects and then I can use the objects directly from the graph to render them, I think that would be more efficient. But then the problem is that I'm gonna have to connect both of the libraries. So another way would be to just do the graph. I'm gonna have another project that I'm gonna create a graph class that is gonna use the boost library, and then it's gonna create the graph based on some data, which in the beginning is gonna be just random positions. Then that class, I'm gonna put a function that solves implements the Barn-Sut physics, and probably I think I'm gonna have to. Maybe actually not. I think I can connect them both on this project. So I have one library that creates the class that is going to be the graph. I'm going to call it network because of the names. And then I have this other library that creates this stuff. Then on the main one, I just initialize the class, the graph class. Then based on the nodes of as I add, I can create other functions or other class that as I add nodes to the network, I just call these functions here in the same way that I was doing in the front end to create the rendering. And then I'm going to have another function that just renders everything. So I'm just going to transfer the lambda from this one into the middle of this loop here. And then I'm going to create other class that is going to be probably based on the kernel example here, that creates the IMGUI, that creates the layout of the IMGUI with the connection of the rendering from the OpenGL. And each one of them is going to be a scene, so the other class manages all the possible scenes. So there's a lot of stuff to do still. Yeah, but I think for now, like this, if it works, then I can start thinking about the renderer. Nice. Seems like it works. So now, and now let me add the renderer class here. So I have to think about a name for the folder. So maybe I should do something on Scarlet Draw to draw this stuff that I'm thinking about. So which way would be the best? Let me think about a name for the subfolder. Actually, let me do the Scarlet Draw stuff first. So this is the stuff that I was talking about last time. So the way that I was thinking about is that I don't need the other class, I think. It might be better to do two classes though. Maybe I don't need the programs one, but then maybe it's like too many things to. The challenging part is trying to think about because I might, with time, try to do other stuff or pivot this project to something else if what I'm thinking about doing doesn't work. So if that's the case, then I'm probably gonna have to to add the ability to draw a bunch of other stuff. So use different programs, different shaders, and different meshes. So I don't want to do it in a way that I get fixed into one thing, but at the same time I want to avoid doing the way that they did it because it's very confusing to understand. So the question is, how should I? So I think the first thing to think about is to clarify the path. And I was thinking about that, but I'm not really sure if that's going to be like efficient enough. What I was thinking about doing is just studying from the shaders, the shader code, what variables do they use here? Because for the shaders, I think I'm gonna have to experiment to see which ones are good. So I have to understand from the class perspective, the buffer geometry, the sphere, and the other geometries that I have, and the material, what variables are they using? And then how they're gonna create the buffers and then update the variables based on the buffers. That's what I have to do. And then I have to figure out a way to simplify what they did. So let me draw some stuff. I think the first thing that I need is gonna be the renderer, obviously. Let me see how they are doing. I think they're initializing with the scene and the camera. Or just the canvas size. The function is gonna. So this is another thing. Maybe I should initialize it with the scene already and the camera. Oh, I have to think about these controls as well. But I think I'm gonna leave this after I have the render. Yeah, because I have the camera, so I can do the matrix multiplications. So let's think. I don't think I'm gonna change the way that they update the camera because it's easier to just copy the stuff that they have. So probably gonna use the model view matrix that they create and then try to update the camera in the same way that they were doing. So maybe I think it is better to just pass as a to pass inside of the function. Yes. I think I have to do, it's probably better to just use the project function that they use. So the way that they do it is just call project object, and then inside of the function, they're gonna call itself recursively and go over, I think it's doing depth first search. And like it's going depth first and horizontally because it's doing on a loop. And then traversing the tree, which is a scene graph that when you create the scene object, it's gonna inherit from object 3D. And then what you do when you add objects to the scene is just create a scene graph, which is a tree. And then the reason why you do that, as far as I understand now, is because when you multiply one matrix, if you have the thing, you can traverse the tree, multiply the other ones to update the position of all the objects on the scene. It's kind of like you coupling models together. So I don't know if that's like the way I should do it as well. Like maybe it's better to just, but I think that it's just easier because it's one of the things that's probably an over optimization kind of thing. And if I think too much about this, it's probably not enough. There isn't. I'm much better off thinking about the other stuff than thinking about this like small optimization. So I'm probably gonna leave like this. So the way that I probably should maintain the project thing, project objects function, and just remove some of the things that I think is not necessary based on what I want to do. So I want to remove as many things as possible. And then only once I get to the point where I'm visualizing and I have the physics already and I start getting the data, then I'm going to be able to think about what kind of things would be good to have. So I want to remove as many things as possible. Then from that point, I start adding stuff again. That's the goal. I think I have to maintain this. So I'm just going to do probably a simple loop over the... So update the camera. I think that's how they do it. They update the camera first. This is another thing that I don't understand why they do it like this. They have this other struct here, and then this struct has the implementations of everything, but I don't understand why. Maybe it's because of the pointer. It's something to do with the pointers that I don't understand very well. The problem is that it's kind of hard to ask ChatGPT about this. But that's what they do here. Just update the scene first. And then updates the... I think this function updates all the models, probably. Don't... Yeah, it is a recursive function as far as I remember here. So the question is, why do they... I think the project object function is more to update the shaders, but it maybe it's because... I'm gonna go over the source code again to remember. So I think that the reason why it does this here first is because if you change the position of an object, so the way that you're gonna do is by the methods on each class, the geometries, and then once you change the position, then this multiplication here is just gonna update the matrix for the model matrix for the class. I think that's what it's doing. This is an object 3D, which is the base class for all the other ones, all the meshes, and then each mesh has through dependency injection the buffer geometry and the material. So it's just updating all the meshes and the scene, the matrix model for each one of them. So probably the other ones are just related to the other matrix multiplications. So the first thing that it does is just updates the model matrices for all of them in case they changed. Then it updates the scene with the camera, I think. I'm just doing matrix multiplication, I think. It doesn't matter that much. So it updates the camera. Hmm. I was not passing any force. I don't remember which way it goes, but I know that when you multiply by the inverse, it's doing like you're translating one coordinate to the other. That makes sense. So when you multiply the inverse of the road with the camera matrix, you get the local position of the camera, I think. I think that's what's happening there. I'm not really sure though. Or maybe this what this is doing, just copying, is just updating the matrix that stores the inverse of the road position based on the camera. Because then you're gonna use this matrix to multiply against the local model matrix, maybe, or something like that. So just inverting the matrix, and then the other one. So it's copying the elements of the matrix that it passes with on the one that called the method. So it's copying this matrix. It's copying the inverse of the. This is the world matrix. That makes sense. So it's just updating the world inverse matrix, and I think that it uses this once to get the local coordinates. Oh, it just does this if the parent is no. I think I'm just gonna copy this part. Not gonna think too much about it. This part I'm gonna remove. This is another thing that I'm not really sure. I think it's probably better to just copy. I was thinking about changing, but I think it's not gonna be worth it. So like the way that they do it is they store the projection matrix on the render class. And after thinking about it, I think that it makes sense. Like first time that on the last stream that I talked about that it would probably be better to put this on the camera, but I think that it doesn't make a lot of sense. It does make sense to put on this one. So it's just updating the projection based on the multiplication of the camera projection. So this is the projection of the screen, and this is the projection of the camera. Or you can ask ChatGPT as well. why they do this. I think I have to do this clipping as well to remove the objects. I think I don't understand very well is that from what I remember, OpenGL is supposed to do that after you get the position on the shader. After you update the gel position, from what I understand, OpenGL is gonna figure out which ones are on the clip space, and then if they are not, it's gonna remove. So, but based on the way that he's doing here, I think this might be the things that's maybe WebGL doesn't clip. I think I'm gonna ask that to ChatGPT because he translated 3JS to C++, so it might be possible that WebGL doesn't clip automatically, and you're responsible for doing that. But if you're using OpenGL, it clips automatically, so you don't have to do it. And then if that's the case, it might be the same with the other stuff here, the projection. Because from what I remember from the tutorials, you don't have to do this stuff here as well. Because it seems that it has two different projection matrices. So I think OpenGL does that for you. This part here, the frustum and the projection screen. Also, maybe this is another, like OpenGL clips the based on the near and far, but that one is to remove, to clip outside of that. I mean, maybe it's just worth it to copy everything, even if I'm not gonna use it. I think that the main thing is just the programs and the way that they are initializing the shaders. I think I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna copy, because then I don't have to think about this stuff. The only thing that I should change is probably the render list. I'm gonna change the render list. I think that's the main thing. And I can copy the rest, unless I have to get like a bunch of files that are not related to what I'm trying to do. Yeah, I'm gonna have to remove, I think. I think up to this point, probably just copy everything and then just add the files. You exploit with OpenAI, Team Render. What do you mean? So it is what I said. So because they update this matrix with the camera matrix before, I think this is already with like doing the conversion between camera space and then road space. And then it updates the model based on this matrix here. I think that's why they multiply there in the beginning. So they update this based on the camera, the inverse of the camera. So this is the inverse of the camera. Multiply by the road maybe. And then they update the local coordinates of the object based on this. And then the result's gonna be the multiplication of the local model matrix based on by the camera. And that's the one that they're gonna use, I think, to update the shader, the position of the shader. I don't know why they use this normal, but it's probably to something related to planes. No, man, sorry. So there is one thing that I was trying to understand on the last. I think I remember that I realized after I streamed last time that it probably initializes in the first way that I was talking about first. I think I'm gonna copy everything off stream later. So I'm just gonna like study a little bit more to see if I can figure out the thing that was confusing. So there's two things, main things that I'm gonna change. One is the way that they initialize in the programs and managing the shaders. And the other one that I want to understand is some initialization here that they do that is kind of confusing. I think is the initialization of the set program here. So they initialize this program on the loop, which I don't understand very well. So let me, because in my mind, this should be inside of a, there should be an if else condition here. Because like it doesn't make sense to, but maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think it doesn't make sense to initialize the program every time inside of the loop. It should make sense that you only initialize once, and then you update the program instead of initializing. But maybe that's what they are doing here inside. I don't think, yeah. So it is kind of the same logic, but instead of doing this variable here, probably do it there, and then only set the program again once if there is a change on the program. But I think the way that I think this is the part that is confusing. Is there's properties here that I don't understand very well how it works. But I think what's happening here in the beginning is that probably this is going to be an empty object, but I don't understand like why, if it is an empty object, if why doesn't it throw an error when you try to access the values? So I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but it would make sense because then this would be false. But let's maybe it doesn't because it's going to be true here, so it doesn't make sense. Oh no, maybe it does. Because if it is true here, then the first time that you're running the loop is going to call this function, and then that makes sense. Because if this is an empty object in the beginning, then the program is not going to exist because it doesn't have this value. So I think that's what's happening. So like because this is an empty object in the beginning, then it's going to be undefined and it's going to hit this branch here, and then it's going to make this true, and then this is going to be undefined, and then it's going to get here. And then they are initializing the materials on this function here. But it's still very confusing. So like this is the function that's it's gonna get. Maybe it's this program cache that they initialize the program only once. Yeah, it doesn't. So I think that this is what's happened. What happens is like in the beginning, it's gonna run this function here, which is the function inside of this function is just gonna create the objects that has the parameters, and the parameters are gonna be the thing that is used to update the variables inside of the shader. So it's gonna select which shader it is based on the shader lib object, and then based on that, at this function here. So based on this thing here, it finds what the default shader and creates this object here that contains all the specifications for creating the program. And this is the thing that I didn't like very much. So the question is, obviously they have a reason to do this. So I can be missing something. The hard part about this is that like you have to understand the shaders and this stuff at the same time, it feels like, because they are connected to each other. So I don't know which way to go about it. If I should study the shaders first, and then from the variables on the shader and trying to understand the shader code, then I reverse engineer and think about this stuff on how to structure the variables on the higher level to update the shaders. The main thing that I want to change is the management, the bridge between the higher level abstraction of the mesh, the class of mesh, and the lower level of the shader. And then how to create the classes that are going to manage the flow of data from the higher level to the low level. Because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to initialize the parameters here. To me, it would be better to initialize as you initialize the class, the parameters. So maybe what I can do is inside of the render function, I can have a Boolean variable that determines whether or not the program was initialized or it needs to change. And if it isn't, then I initialize the program, initialize the parameters. It would be the same thing. I think the reason why they do like this is probably because they want to decouple the scene object with the class. Because the other way would be to initialize the parameters in the program as you initialize the render class. Because if you do it inside of the loop, you kind of have to do like this, I think. So the question is there a better way to do this? One thing that I can do is, the problem is that the way that I'm thinking about, I'm not really sure if it's going to be useful to allow for having different, like different ways to display in the scene. I think based on the way that they do it, is recommended to always have the scene as the parent, and then you create whatever structure you want as a child or children of the scene. That's what makes sense. So maybe it makes more sense to initialize the scene as a part, as a variable or an attribute inside of the renderer. So dependency injection. Or you just initialize the renderer and you have a variable that is the scene. So yeah, but it will be the same thing. So what I'm thinking about is instead of looping over the objects of the scene, but I don't know if that makes sense because you still need the object 3D to update everything. I was gonna say like you create a mapping of the material and the shader is using, because the material seems to be the thing that matters to select the shaders. So you create in the beginning outside of the loop, the rendering loop, and then you already know, like based on the like can create a condition that checks to see if you have the value or yeah, if you have the value inside of or the key. If you create a hash every time you initialize a mesh, and then based on that hash you create the object inside of the render that is gonna map the hash of the material with the shader or the program that it uses, which is gonna be the program class. Then inside of the loop you check for that, you check for the key on the object, and then if the thing has the key, then you just call whatever methods of this class here to handle the buffers, and then you put the control flow inside of that to manage the flow of data between them. So like you put conditions to see if any of the values changed, if any of the values of the class changed, and if they did, then you update the values on the shader. So I think that probably is better to do it. But the question, if I do it like that, is that is whether or not is better because of the projection. Because on the project object function there, you're gonna have to go over all of them anyway. So you're gonna have to traverse the scene anyway. So I don't know if it makes a lot of sense. Hmm. And the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. Maybe removing the render list. I think the main thing that is confusing is the render list with the items. So if I just loop over the scene instead, scene objects, instead of creating the list. I think the biggest question, like if I do this way of mapping the mesh with the, like I get the material ID or something like that, that is a hash, and then I map that to a class that is the shader program responsible for creating that the class, that object. I can do it like that, but then The biggest question is whether or not, like, when you want to update the scene, because you're gonna have to traverse the tree, which is the scene graph. If it makes sense to have all the things inside of the object instead of traversing the scene, or if it makes sense to do both. Because if you have to traverse the tree, then maybe it does make more sense to do it the way that they did it here, and just maybe change the control flow a little bit, because then you're already gonna have to traverse anyway, so it doesn't make sense to catch everything on the. I think I have to understand more like the actual construction of the shader. How does it work? This is the thing that I don't understand very well as well. Is uh, when is it going to create this for the first time? Because I think that these properties here, they map the material ID with the parameters, I think. Yeah, probably. So at what point do they create this relationship between them? That's the question. And here is not very clear. Maybe it's one of these classes here. WebGL. I haven't seen these classes or functions. Yeah, there's nothing here. So I guess this is the question that I have to clarify first. It's what moments they create the mapping. I think it's in the beginning there. That's the thing. So they're gonna map just if it doesn't have when you call get, if it doesn't have, it maps, I think. Yeah, on the function here already. So if you call and it doesn't, it's undefined, which is gonna be in the beginning, then it creates the object and then it sets the. I think that's how they do it. So just setting the. This is kind of another thing that I'm not really sure because it's using the key as a. It's using the class as a key, which I didn't know it can do in JavaScript. But I guess it's just mapping the material class with this empty object. So the question is, at what point do they update this with the values of the properties or the parameters that are going to render the material? Definitely this function I have to change, I think. So this is the parts. So this part I'm gonna change, but the other ones I'm thinking that might be better to just leave the way that it is. Oh, so yeah, here. So it's creating a map here. So I think it updates here. It's probably the thing that I'm thinking. Just gonna be an empty object in the beginning because it doesn't have anything. Then it updates the object on this function here. And then it tries to get the cache and it doesn't have. and then that's the first time that it's gonna create the program, I think. Yeah, so I think that's how it works. In the beginning is an empty object, then it does a check there, and then it updates everything here. It adds values on the object, and the next time is gonna have the values, so it doesn't check, it doesn't go through the same thing. But I don't like the way that this is done. So now I have to understand. So I think it uses this stuff here to update the shaders or create the program. So I have to understand how does it do that exactly. It's gonna be through these classes here, but I wanna clarify like exactly what is going on. I think it's through these values here. So this, so yeah, that's how it does it. So it caches everything in the beginning there. So at first it's going to be an empty object. This thing is going to be an empty object. And then based on the other function there is just going to add values, key value pairs based on the control flow there. And then based on that, it's going to get, because it's stored the program on this value here, it's going to get the uniforms, which are the variables based on the program. And the program, I think, is going to be the class. I'm not really sure now. Yeah, program. So this is based on the control flow. But I think the first time is going to hit this one. And then it's just going to be, I think this function creates the program if it doesn't have on the cache, as far as I remember. And now I don't know. It seems like it's not doing that. So which one is the one that's, I think it's the acquire programs. Acquire program. Oh, so it is this one. I just confused the. Yeah, so it is what I was thinking about. So this is the first time that it creates the program here. And it's gonna do that based on this thing. So I think the first time is an empty object, and then it falls into this function here based on the control flow of the render buffer direct. And then here is gonna create the program for the first time, and then it's just gonna create the key value pair here on this class. So the question is, what is the relationship between the material properties and this program here? So here it does the linking. So that's how it connects. So now I think I understand. They're just based on the material type. So it's getting the shader that is using based on material type, and then the uniforms are going to be the variables from that shader. Shader uniforms. So these are the values. Huh. So they store everything on JavaScript. I didn't see this the first time because I was seeing all the other stuff. So these variables here are supposed to be inside of the shader, I think. Depending which one you're gonna use, probably. Yeah, so it doesn't. Oh, so it has here. But it's confusing as fuck. So I think I'm gonna stop here. I think I roughly understand, but I'm very tired. So probably next time I'm going to try to clarify how everything. I'm gonna try to create or to simplify this thing here. So they're basically just creating a bunch of maps. They're creating the program the first time based on their control flow. Then they are mapping the program with one object, and then they're connecting that object with the other one to keep track of the uniforms on the other one. And then they use those uniforms variables to update the shader, I think. So what I have to see, and they're gonna use this at some point. Then they update the values of the uniforms. I don't remember. Oh, this is the program, so get uniforms. So the logic to create the thing is gonna be here. Obviously, makes sense. It's very. It feels more complicated than it has to be. So this class is supposed to cache the uniforms that the program is using. Yeah, so they're basically just getting the variables of the program here, and they are setting the value there. So it just gets the uniforms and then sets. So it's on the other class. So they're using this class here to update all the values of the variables. this function here. Yeah, I'm tired. I'm gonna stop now. So next time, probably gonna. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do this off stream, but I'm gonna continue to do this. I'm gonna try to simplify as much as possible this part of creating the shaders and everything else. And once I do that, then I'm gonna try to see if I can render a simple sphere there. And once I can create the scene, I have to test the group as well that I forgot. But so once I can create the basic stuff that I need to create the graph with the same way that I was creating the front end, then I'm going to start working on the other class to create the graph data structure. And once I have both of those classes, then I'm going to combine them, obviously. Then I start working on the integration of the GUI with the OpenGL graph scene. And once I have, I think I'm going to try to do the Barnes hut first because it's probably harder. So once I figure that, once I get to the point where I have the Barnes hut simulation or solver ready and I can create the graph and update based on the solver, then after that point, I'm going to probably move to another project, start from scratch, and then from that one, I'm going to, it's going to be the main thing that is going to be just integrating IMGUI with the thing. And then at that point, I can start thinking about the data, how I'm going to get the data and what I want to do after that. So I'm going to stop here. I'm not sure when I'm going to come back, but see you then.